I'm David Hazard, founder and director of Ascent, an international coaching program for authors. I'm here today to talk with one of my clients, Wood Parker, who has written a reflective and extremely insightful book for business and organizational leaders called Wisdom from a Beehive. Wood, it's wonderful to have you here today, and thank you for coming.
Well, thanks very much, David. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Right. So I'm curious, what inspired you to write your book?
Well, I'm a backyard beekeeper. It's been a hobby of mine for many years, and it still is. And for many years, when I would go into the hives, I enjoyed just sitting and observing the bees. I would watch the foraging bees bring in the nectar and the pollen to the hive. I would watch the nurse bees as they cared for the new brood. I would watch the queen, when I could find her, and her attendants as she carried out her egg-laying function. And for many of those years, because I'm a businessman, I was interested in questions regarding the honey.
Well, and not just a businessman, but I mean a CEO of pretty well-placed, powerful businesses in the Washington, D.C. area. You've been in business in New York, so you've been at the helm of some big ships.
Well, I might just expand on that. I served as a commanding officer of a frontline Navy combatant ship back during the Iran-Iraq war, deploying to the Persian Gulf. I've been the managing partner of a major business unit of one of the large accounting firms, and I've been the president and CEO of a $2 billion business.
Yeah.
So I've got experience that pertains to the issues of leadership. But returning to your question about why did I write this book, it has to do, I think, with these bees and a study of honeybee colonies. As I said, as a businessman, I was interested in questions about the honey. How much honey would the hive produce? How much honey could I harvest at the end of the season? But as I continued to observe the bees, I started to recognize that this incredible swarm of activity that produced a tremendously productive organization, it was more than just the honey. That is, it was more than the product of the labors.
Okay.
I started to look at the hives as living organisms and trying to consider the life of the organization. As the beekeeper, I needed to be concerned about the life of the organization because if a honeybee colony is not operating at its peak, both, from the queen all the way down to the individual worker bees, then the production of honey might be high for a short period of time, but that hive may not be healthy and it will eventually diminish and probably die. When you think of human organizations, I think it's similar. If a human organization, a company, or a business, or a nonprofit organization is not operating at its peak, from the CEO down to the individual workers on the front lines, then that company may do well for a short period of time. But if it's not healthy throughout, its production, its performance will diminish over time and it may die. So as I looked at these honeybee colonies from that new perspective, the life of the organization, I started to realize that honeybees and honeybee colonies contained lessons that pertain to complex human organizations, lessons for me and my leadership team, lessons for me as a business leader, lessons for my company and our employees. And so I think it was that realization or that insight that this pertains to human organizations that was the impetus for my writing this book.
Brilliant, because it's you intuitively saw the bee colony as a microcosm for the macrocosm that you were living in of a major corporation.
Very true, very true. And again, the CEO or the business leader's role is to look at the life of the organization, not to be fixated on just the results, not to be fixated on the myopia of those quarterly results, but to think of the life of the organization, the health of the organization for the long term.
Yeah. And, and I have to say, having worked with you through the drafts of the book, you really achieved a beautiful overlay of the, we could see the life of the hive and how it relates to the life of the corporation. It's just a beautiful, simple, but also profound comparison of the two entities.
Well, I think that that honeybees are fascinating creatures. They have a relatively simple organic structure, which is good for a business if it's simple, but they have amazingly productive organizations, which is what businesses want.
Yes. Yeah.
And as I'm sure we'll discuss as we continue to ponder these questions, it is the lessons, the insights of how honeybees, without top-down supervision and without that top-down authoritarian control, can have such a productive organization that I think pertains and have lessons for complex human companies.
Yes. So tell us briefly what your book is about.
Well, there are two dimensions that I tried to incorporate in the writing of this book. One is the honeybee and the honeybee colony. How do these fascinating creatures, with their self-organization and initiative on the part of individual honeybees, how does that pertain to a human organization and to leadership of that human organization? And the second dimension has to do with my professional experience.
Mm-hmm.
All of my experience has shown me that the long-term value and the long-term success of companies and organizations, the most important factor are the people, the employees of that organization. I believe that it is the employees that determine whether a company will succeed or fail over time. If you think about it, markets and customer demands will change. Products are time perishable. New technologies are temporary. Strategies become outdated. But over time, it is the employees and their initiative, their creativity that will determine whether that company will succeed over time. So the business leader's role, therefore, is to create and nurture an environment in which they can tap into the knowledge of their employees and unleash their creativity, their personal initiative, and their energy, similar to what happens in a beehive colony. Now, my book talks about purpose, process, and people. Today, I believe that effective organizations are motivated by purpose. They are managed efficiently by focusing on the right processes, and they are literally powered by the creativity and the empowerment of their people throughout the organization. So with these guiding principles, if you will, leavened with a knowledge of honeybee colonies and how they function, I have developed what I think is a simple and what I refer to as a higher level leadership model that can help business leaders address the challenges of the future and assist them as they attempt to create and nurture truly great companies.
So then the person who will benefit from this book the most is middle management, upper management. Who do you see? Who would you like to see, picking up this book and saying, "My gosh, these are insights I can take and use in organizational design, personnel management"? Who's your audience?
Well, I think it's all of the elements that you mentioned, David. I think for business leaders today, this book can illuminate for them some insights in terms of employee empowerment, in terms of the importance of how employees can help their companies be successful. And at the same time, I would think that people in middle management, those who are aspiring for higher leadership roles, would benefit from this book as well.
I see. Okay. Well, I have to say that, again, I think you achieved grabbing my interest. I'm not a CEO of a major corporation or middle management guy, but I was fascinated by the world of bees that you opened up in such short, pithy, insightful braces of copy, and then to touch on what you said a moment ago. the idea just sort of exploded in my thinking that you were right. The wisdom, the talent bank, it's really embodied in the people.
That's right.
And that's got to just be something that in the pressure of business, in the rapidly changing business environment, I think, pity the man or woman who's at the head of the ship of state, so to speak, because you're constantly keeping an eye on the rough waters out there. And you shifted our focus wonderfully back to taking care of the people in the corporation, understanding the talent bank that's there.
Well, I appreciate those comments very much, David. And I do believe, and I've thought of this many times, that I don't know of any company that doesn't say our people are our most important asset. And companies continuously commit to investing in their employees. But at the first sign of a downturn in the economy or a competitive loss or some bad event, those commitments and those promises to employees are frequently forgotten, and the burden of the challenge of the company is placed on the backs of the employees. I believe that as we go forward, and I indicated this earlier, it is the employees that will determine the success or failure over time. So it's important for CEOs and middle managers and business leaders in general to recognize that it's important for their company, the life of their company, the long-term value of their company, to recognize the importance of employees. Now, to be sure, there are times when business leaders have to make decisions and take actions that are contrary to the best interest of employees. Those include, obviously, things like reductions in force, perhaps, and other actions, but it's the environment that leaders create in which employees trust the leaders and know that the leaders recognize their value and that the leaders will continue to respect their dignity and will provide communications and information to them in a transparent way. And it's in that environment of trust, mutual trust, that the commitment, the energy, the personal initiative, the creativity of employees can be unleashed and leveraged to the benefit of the company. And part of what I'm trying to articulate in this book is that reality for business leaders.
Excellent. So, did you make any interesting or unusual discoveries in the process of writing?
Well, I think it has to do with the honeybees. I literally have enjoyed this hobby for many years, but as I started to recognize that it's important for the beekeeper to look at the life of the hive and as how that can pertain to an organization, I think it was that insight that was most revealing, if you will, to me. And if you think about it for a minute, a honeybee colony is incredibly flexible. It responds to changes in its environment. It is robust. Even when individual honeybees fail or die, there are other honeybees that take their place and take up the task that's being performed. And then they have this incredible self-organization and initiative on the part of individual worker bees. They have an ability to drop whatever task they are performing and take up a new task that is needed or necessary for the benefit of the entire colony. Let me give you an example. In a honeybee hive, it's important to maintain the temperature between roughly 92 degrees and 96 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature that the queen needs to lay the eggs, and it's the temperature that the brood, the young bees, can survive. If the temperature gets too cold, then obviously the young brood cannot survive. And what the bees do, they simply cluster together and they cover the brood, and that warmth gives them the warmth they need to survive. But if the hive gets too hot, say over 100 degrees, and it happens in the summer,
Sure.
then what happens is somehow there's a call that goes out, and the foraging bees will drop the pollen or the nectar that they're carrying, and they will go and get water. They'll bring the water to the hive. The bees that are in the hive will drop whatever they're doing, go and get the water, and will cover the frames and the capped comb and everything in the hive. And then the bees start fanning with their wings. Literally, half of them on the outside fanning in and half on the inside fanning out, and it produces a draft, and that air
That's-
going over the water
That's incredible.
produces
It's a natural air conditioner.
it's a primitive air conditioning
That's
system
incredible.
that lowers the temperature in the hive. Now, think about it. How this pertains to human organizations is that there is no top-down direction or supervision. The queen doesn't provide that direction. There's no small group of super bees that provide the supervision. This is done by the worker bees throughout the hive for the benefit of the overall colony. And when you think about human organizations, the traditional top-down control, authoritative structure and direction by senior leaders, by corporate staffs, that approach no longer can achieve the speed, the flexibility, the creativity that companies need in today's environment. So the role of the business leader is, again, to create and nurture an environment in which empowerment truly flourishes, and those leaders can tap into and unleash the knowledge, the initiative, and the creativity of workers throughout the organization, just like in a beehive.
Yeah. Well, and you expressed real interest and support for younger people in their 20s and early 30s, entering the workforce because of the talent bank that's there, their knowledge of technology, their ability to access information, so much more readily than when I was coming up, and we didn't have Google, we didn't have search engines. I can barely operate an iPhone, and here are people coming into the workforce who have these incredible skills.
Yes.
And as I said, research abilities and abilities to put ideas together in new ways. And I really appreciated the fact that you expressed such an interest and place such a value on those young people.
Well, it's important, obviously, and indeed, that's one of the changes that is occurring in the workplace today that people of our generation have not experienced, that intergenerational workforce,
Yes.
the baby boomers, the millennials, and so forth. And it is the challenge of leadership today to create an environment that encompasses the different mores and the different priorities of these different generations, because they are different. The younger generation, by the way, in addition to being more, connected in terms of technology and each other, seem to be even more motivated by things like purpose, a higher purpose, a motivational purpose than some of the other generations prior to this. So that's one reason I emphasize purpose as part of my purpose process in people. But it's the younger generation that I think is that business leaders who are so accustomed to dealing only with the baby boomers who have dominated the workforce for many decades have to recognize as one of the changes in the workforce today that they need to take account of.
Yeah, good. So in the many years that I've been coaching authors, my experience has been many times the writing of a book changes the author. And so I'm curious if during the course of writing your book something happened. Were there any discoveries, any personal changes or insights that happened in your work process?
I think that I may not have had a fundamental change in a personal sense, but one thing that the writing of this book did for me is to illuminate for me that there are certain aspects of leadership that are undefined and maybe even mysterious. It is not unlike instinct in a honeybee colony. We don't completely understand it, but we see its effects. And I referred to this higher level of leadership a moment ago, and I think that this is part of that higher level of leadership that I was trying to describe and to capture. Obviously, actions on the part of a leader are important. Leadership characteristics and attributes are important. And indeed, I discuss what I consider to be the most important leadership attributes for today. But in terms of that higher level of leadership, it has to do with things like the competitive environment, those unforeseen forces in the marketplace that you can't anticipate. It has to do with that mysterious chemistry that affects human relationships and camaraderie. It is something that we can't necessarily see or define, and it's certainly not anything that we can control. But when it's part of the atmosphere or the DNA of a company, then the company will have tremendous energy, purpose, camaraderie, and heart. And so the leader's role is to do everything in his or her power to create that company, that environment. Now, obviously, leaders and their actions can have an impact and can influence the vitality and success of the company. And so a lot of what a leader is about is doing, actions. But I think the truly great leader recognizes that there are certain things that he or she cannot control. So they are more about being or becoming, being the type of person they want to be, becoming the type of leader they want to be, and in terms of their organization or their company, helping that company become the type of company they want to become.
Excellent. Thanks. One last question.
Okay.
If there is one thing that you would like your readers to take away from the book, what is it?
I think we discussed it briefly earlier, and that is the true value of people and the employees throughout their organization, and to recognize that many times there are things that have to be done, reductions in force, reduction in holidays, whatever the issue may be, that will be inimical to the interest of employees. But if a leader recognizes that it is the employees of their organization that will determine their success or failure over a long period of time, and to treat that resource in that fashion, then I think my book will have the impact that I want it to have. I think that leaders can take actions that might be negative to an employee, but they need to have that environment in which the people trust them, that they know that you are making decisions for the best interest of the company, including all the employees, that they know you will respect their dignity, that you're going to be transparent, that you explain the decisions and the reasons for them. And when you have that sort of trusting environment, when you have that sort of true empowerment, then you can have that company that you and I are referring to, and the type of company that we want our businesses to become.
Wood Parker, thank you for joining me today and giving me the time to do this interview about your book, Wisdom from a Beehive. Full of great insights for business and organizational leaders. Thank you for writing that book.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate your help in that regard, and I've enjoyed this conversation very much.
All right. I've been here today talking with Wood Parker about his book, Wisdom from a Beehive. I'm David Hazard, the founder and director of Ascent, a coaching program for authors. If you have need of coaching services to develop your manuscript, design services, or website development, please find us on the web at www.itsyourlifebethere.com.